J.J. Abrams says The Last Jedi didn't derail plans for Rise of Skywalker. First of all, I just want to say to everyone that's sharing this, because I have seen people sharing it, and they're saying things like, hey, Last Jedi haters, you should take a look at this. Someone saying that The Last Jedi didn't derail plans for Rise of Skywalker is not a compliment. All that says is, they didn't do it so absolutely horribly that there's no way we could continue telling our story. No, they didn't do it that bad. That's all that's been said. If you literally take a look at the quotes that all of these different articles are about, so the story that we started to conceive when we did The Force Awakens, it was allowed to continue. Episode 8 didn't really derail anything that we were thinking about. So first of all, he said didn't really derail. So in some ways it did derail some things that they were thinking about, but not so bad that he couldn't actually do it. But that's not a victory. That's not saying that The Last Jedi was good. It's not saying that Abrams likes The Last Jedi. It's not saying that he likes the direction that it went and that it helps his overall story. It doesn't say any of that. To find where he actually, his own words, all of these, that's the other thing. All of these articles then go on to extrapolate from that small comment, episode 8 didn't derail anything, that what Abrams means is everything's fine and everything's going to be great and no one has anything to worry about. Get hyped for Rise of Skywalker. The question is literally, did The Last Jedi derail your plans for Rise of Skywalker? They're asking the director who made the movie after The Last Jedi. What's he going to say? Yes, it did. We couldn't make a movie. I don't know why we keep showing trailers. No, of course he's not going to say that. To answer that question, he has to straight up just, yeah, no, it didn't. I will keep telling this story. It's hardly the same thing as saying, hey, I like it and I like the direction we're going. So to find a more detailed account from his own words, not the words of the people writing these clickbait articles, the 5 different articles that have the same tiny little quote and then they make up a bunch of stuff. Let's actually find out what J.J. Abrams thinks about working on this movie. And before I really get into it, I do want to say that in this interview, J.J. Abrams talks about how big of a Star Wars fan he is, how he was excited to work on this, and how he thinks he's come away with something great. He is passionate about his product, and he's excited. He's excited, and he thinks that they've come up with something good. And so Abrams starts talking. I wasn't supposed to be there. I wasn't the guy, I was working on some other things. I had something else that I was supposed to do. Kathleen Kennedy called and said, would you really seriously consider coming aboard? Now, what does that tell you right there? Kathleen Kennedy is desperate. She doesn't have a way to end this. She just lost a director, and the only thing she has left to do is to reach out to J.J. Abrams to try and finish the story that he started telling. Abrams goes on, to have no script and to have a release date and have it be essentially a 2-year window when you're saying you've got 2 years from the decision to do it to release and you have literally nothing. You have literally nothing. You don't have the story, you don't have the cast, you don't have the designers, the sets. There was a crew, there were things that will be worked on for the version that preceded ours, but this was starting over. And because this was such a mega job, I knew the very least I needed a co-writer to work with on this thing. And so then he talks about how he reaches out to Chris Terrio. And they're excited to work in this thing, but think about that. He says there's no script. He says there's no story. So nothing is planned out. They had this goes on to show, this is one of the continuing things that goes to show there was no overarching plan. And the story that he's telling is not the same as the story that was just being told in The Last Jedi. That's not what he's there to do. And when he says there's no story, no script, no anything like that, he did initially write scripts and treatments for where he wanted the story to go. Then Rian Johnson did whatever the heck he wanted to do and ignored it all. And now JJ's supposed to come in and he's going to finish his story. And I tell you that that's exactly what's happening. I'll let JJ Abrams just say it. because he eventually gets to talking about episode 8 in this interview. It was a completely unknown scenario. I had some gut instincts about where the story would have gone, but without getting in the weeds on episode 8, that was a story that Ryan wrote and was telling based on 7 before we met. So he was taking the thing in another direction. So we also had to respond to episode 8. So our movie was not just following what we had started, it was following what we had started and then had been advanced by someone else. So there was that, and finally it was resolving 9 movies. While there are some threads of larger ideas and big picture things that had been conceived decades ago, and a lot of ideas that Lawrence Kasdan and I had when we were doing episode 7, the lack of absolute inevitability, the lack of a complete structure for this thing, given the way it was being run, was an enormous challenge. Now, here on Read Between the Lines, you gotta read between the lines. What is he saying there? He's saying nothing has been planned. There is a lack of coordination. There is a lack of an overarching story. The things that he's talking about there, he's talking about the story we started and then was advanced by someone else. But with the lack of complete structure for this thing, the way it's being run was an enormous challenge. Who's running it? Kathleen Kennedy. And I think Ridley Scott said it pretty well back in an interview in 2017. He was asked, "You've watched other people take over franchises you've made. How often are you asked to do that? Has Kathleen Kennedy offered you a Star Wars movie?" And he said, No, I'm too dangerous for that. He said, "Why is that?" "Because I know what I'm doing." And then he laughed. I think they like to be in control, and I like to be in control of myself. When you get a guy who's done a low-budget movie and you suddenly give him $180 million, it makes no sense whatsoever. It's effing stupid. You know what the reshoots cost? I can't imagine. Millions. You can get me for my fee, which is heavy, but I'll be under budget and on time. This is where experience does matter. It's as simple as that. It can make you dull as dishwater, but if you're really experienced and you know what you're doing, it's effing essential. Grow into it little by little. Start low budget, get a little bit bigger. Maybe after 20 million you can go to 80, but don't suddenly go to 160. And so in that interview, he's just talking about how experience is essential. He's got that experience. There are other people that have that experience, but Kathleen Kennedy isn't hiring those people, or at least initially wasn't hiring those people. She has a habit of hiring and firing and then hiring other people, which is why I feel like it was a scramble to get JJ in to finish this, which was just a last-ditch effort to make some coherent story out of this mess that this sequel trilogy has become, due mostly to poor management. Tell me what you think in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more content.